One clean strike on dark wood detonates through the courtroom, ricocheting off the marble, sailing over the rustle of suits and the antiseptic hiss of the air vents. It slams into my chest like a memory I have been holding underwater 13 winters, 13 report cards, 13 empty Christmas mornings. What if the truth that saves you is the truth that breaks your family? What if justice doesn't look like triumph at all but like a hand letting go of another hand that once felt like your own? I am Eleanor Vance, 67 years old, and my fingers are welded around a yellow envelope that has outlived friendships, appliances, and even the arthritis brace that nestles my right wrist. Across the aisle, my daughter stands in a suit that fits better than her story. Her attorney points like a traffic cop at a wreck. The judge peers over his glasses, the way men who have seen too many lies try to see around their edges. The gavel waits on its belly for its next breath. So do I. Because inside this envelope lies the reason I raised 3 children who weren't mine to hold but were mine to love. Inside is the reason their mother disappeared and the reason she has returned. Inside are photographs, letters, and one document whose ink could drown a city. Inside is the part of the truth that money can smell from 2 blocks away. When I open this, we do not go back to being a family who merely disagrees. We become a story a courtroom tells itself to remember where the line is. The gavel rises. Mrs. Vance, the judge says, "What do you have to say?" I lift the envelope, and we begin. The courtroom. If a courtroom has a soul, it lives in the space between questions and answers. Today that space tastes like old coffee and new fear. Your Honor, Valerie says, my daughter, 39 now, hair coiled perfectly at the nape as if that alone can hold a life together. My mother kept my children for 13 years without my consent. This constitutes parental kidnapping. Kidnapping, the word sits like a stone in my throat, heavy with its own gravity. The audience murmurs. My grandchildren: Arthur, 20, Emily, 18, Andrea, 16, fold and unfold their hands as if prayer is a fidget. I don't turn to them. I know their faces by heart. I know the ways grief makes teenagers look older and love keeps their shoulders from slumping all the way down. Valerie's lawyer, Mark Sullivan, has the confidence of a man who reads judging faces for a living. We'll show, he says, that Mrs. Vance exploited a vulnerable period postpartum depression to alienate the children from their mother. Mrs. Vance, Judge Theodore Mason says, and his voice is sanded by years of other people's emergencies. Your response, my response, I say, is in here. The paper's edge bites my thumb. I welcome the sting. It proves I'm still a body and not one of my own memories. He nods, but he doesn't let me rush before evidence. He says, tell us the story. The court will hear you from the beginning. The beginning. Beginnings are strange. How we only recognize them because the world changes after and refuses to change back. The rainy Tuesday. It started on a Tuesday. I say, October, a rain that couldn't decide if it wanted to be serious. My mind unspools the kitchen's quiet, the rattle of the teaspoon against a chipped cup, chamomile steam fogging the little window over my sink, my doctor's words about my wrist still drying in the air. Arthritis, permanent, manage it, pace yourself, pace yourself. I thought, tell that to a life that keeps accelerating. 3 knocks, not frantic and like someone trying to convince the door. It knew them once. I opened it and found my daughter with 3 small hurricanes at her knees. Arthur was 7, elbows and questions and shoes with holes. Emily 5's, that catalogued everything and kept the list in her mouth. Andrea 3's, melling like milk in a storm that hasn't started yet. No bags, I'd asked, absurdly, as if the problem was luggage. There was a plastic sack swinging from Valerie's handshirts rolled into themselves. A single sock, something sticky at the bottom that later became a story about spilled jelly and never being able to afford name brand anything. The babies clung to her coat. She peeled them off like bandages. Just a few weeks, Mom, she said. Her voice had that glittery, brittle optimism of people pushing an elevator button that's already lit. I need to sort things out. What things? Just things. She kissed them fast, the way you kissed the stove to prove you didn't get burned, and fled into a taxi whose exhaust scribbled a gray line across our street. Andrea pressed her forehead to the window glass and fogged a little oval, like her breath was trying to keep her mother from leaving. I put a pot on for soup because boiling water is the simplest way to say I love you without terrifying anybody. We ate at the small table I once bought on layaway. Arthur asked when his mother was coming back. Soon, I said, because I believed it at the time. and because a helpless truth can be crueler than a hopeful lie. The weeks that didn't end, I thought it was temporary. I tell the judge, I thought we were measuring a pause, not a lifetime. Sunday became Friday, became Monday. The doorbell didn't ring. The phone didn't either. When I finally went to Valerie's old apartment, the neighbors told me what you never want to hear about your own child. She moved out after 3 months unpaid. The landlady handed me a banker's box, a scatter of bills, a half-scribbled grocery list, 3 birth certificates bent at the corners, and a letter I wouldn't find until years later, one I'm ready to burn the day I read it and never do. In the house. Grief adapted itself into errands. Bedwetting became extra sheets. Silent spells became coloring books with sharpened pencils, always within reach. Coughs became soup and steamy bathrooms, and a grandmother who slept on her side so an ear could point to each bedroom doorway. Emotionally, we were a country with aftershocks. Practically, we were a to-do list. I sold jewelry, I say, saved receipts like prayers, took weekend jobs cleaning houses that smelled like citrus and the spare time other people can afford. A neighbor, Elma, I nod toward the gallery, where Elma lifts a damp Kleenex and gives me her look that says, steady now. Watched the little ones when I worked late. We built routines and called them a family. Judge Mason scribbles a note. Guardianship? Not at first, I say. At first, I held my breath and called it hope. Hope worked until Andrea's lungs didn't. Pneumonia, a fever that glowed on the digital thermometer like a siren. At admissions, they asked for the papers adults ask for, as if childhood arrives with a file folder. Insurance, parent authorization, signatures, our kitchen couldn't provide. That's when I hired a lawyer with 2 checks, separated by a week of cleaning one more office and taking on one more stairway because stairs pay by the square foot. We filed for temporary guardianship then, for the kind that keeps teachers from hesitating when they write a name on a permission slip. We published notices. I tell the judge, we mailed letters to addresses that answered back with silence. We stapled our lives to due process and waited for an echo. My palms sweat, the envelope grows tacky. In the 3rd row, Emily presses her fingertips together the way she does when she's trying not to cry. Did you obtain guardianship? The judge asks. Yes. 10 years ago, this courthouse turned 3 hungry children into a legal promise. The courtroom shifts. My daughter's lawyer adjusts his tie as if it's the facts that need straightening. The return to months ago. The doorbell rang again. Grief is an expert mimic. For one dizzying beat, I thought the past had returned in its original packaging. But the woman on my porch wasn't a young mother with rain in her hair. She was a stranger in a tailored coat with a lifetime of choices dried into the fabric. Beside her stood the attorney, whose briefcase had the silent swagger of a leather thing that never loses its arguments. Custody, she said. I'm their mother. Guilt, when it arrives late, often brings a lawyer. That night, I took the yellow envelope from the cupboard. I sat at the small table I had bought on layaway, placed the envelope in the center as if it were a candle, and admitted something I had never said aloud. I had saved everything for this day, not to punish, but to protect. Your Honor, I say now, and the present returns. You asked what is in this envelope. I turn it over. The flap lifts with the sigh of an old secret. Paper glides. A red ribbon loosens around photographs that smell faintly of the drawer where they learned to wait. The clerk approaches with a practiced blankness. The judge, out of habit, lowers his eyes before truth can blind him. First, I say, the day they arrived. I pass the photographs. The first is Arthur in his Sussel holes. The second is Emily with a geography of dried food on her cheek, hair not so much tangled as abandoned. The third is Andrea in a diaper time had stopped changing. I do not look at Valerie when these images travel her way, but the courtroom tells me what I would see. The flinch, the neck muscle like a wire. Mark Sullivan leans in and reads a client's future on glossy paper. These were taken, I say, on October 12, 2011. A nurse neighbor told me, document everything, dear. Memory will be your accused someday. Give it company. The judge nods once. His pen pauses, remembering its own children at 7 and 5 and 3. Letters from the after next, I say, the letters. They are written in Valerie's hand, the loopy insistence of youth, preserved under ink. I do not need a handwriting expert. My body recognizes the script that wrote I hate you at 15 and I'm sorry at 15 and a half. 3 weeks after she left. I say, a letter. She had met a man. New city. Just a little longer, Mom, she wrote. He needs me to focus on us. The courtroom is a tuning fork. You can feel vibration before you hear sound. In a second letter, I continue, she was pregnant. The new man didn't want baggage from before. Her phrase, not mine. I didn't tell the children there was a brother. They had enough absence to manage. In a third, I say, and the words find steel in my throat. She asked me to sign a statement relinquishing any claim on her, offering $500 for expenses to date. I sent no account. I sent a sentence. If you intend to disappear, do it cleanly. Do not write the children halfway into your new life and call it love. Did she respond? The judge asks. Once. I lift the paper that has slept at the bottom of the envelope for 13 years like a coral reef building itself from loss. She wrote, I have my own family now. Tell them I had to go far away for work. She signed it like a receipt. Then she vanished. Behind me, my grandchildren's breath arranges itself into a rhythm we have learned to call courage. In front of me, the court reporter keys the past into the present one letter at a time. Why now? Why now? The judge asks softly, almost to himself. After all this time, because grief can smell money, and money can smell grief that grew up without it. 3 months ago, I say, my brother, Arthur Vance's uncle Art to the children died in Texas. No children of his own. In his careful engineer's hand, he left each grandchild $50,000. A trust, clean, simple. I pause. I can feel Valerie tense. Truth often announces itself in the body first. The trust documents specify, I continue, that while a child is a minor, a direct guardian manages the money, mother or grandmother. I had already begun the paperwork for them to access it when they turned 21. 2.5 months ago, my daughter retained counsel and began investigating my brother's estate. Speculation, Sullivan says, standing. We object to motive, not speculation. I reply calmly. I slide a thin folder forward. A licensed investigator's report commissioned after my daughter arrived on my porch with a legal threat. Recent employment records, eviction notice, a debt ledger that reads like a tightrope fraying, and printed text messages from a phone that still wakes me at 3 a.m. when its ghost of a ring runs through my dreams. The clerk receives the papers. The judge's eyebrows tilt toward each other the way clouds do just before a storm. Read, he says. I read, July 18th. I'm the biological mother. Any judge will side with me. July 20th. What you did could be considered parental kidnapping. You could go to jail. July 22nd. If you give me custody voluntarily, we can reach an agreement on the inheritance 50/50ths. If you force me to go to trial, I get everything. Words can be knives. They can also be mirrors. Today they are both. The children's voices, Your Honor, I say, and for the first time my voice shakes. Not with fear, but with the weight of what is at stake. Before I show the final document, I ask the court to hear my grandchildren. Their lives have been the evidence I could never fit into an envelope. The judge agrees. Arthur walks forward, long and careful, like he's learned pacing from years of being the oldest. Emily follows, spine straight, kindness hard-won. Andrea last, chin set at an angle I recognize from photographs of myself when I was 20 and ready to lift the world with my bare hands. They speak and the room changes temperature. They do not perform. They tell small truths that add up to a life. Chicken soup, parent-teacher meetings, insulin needles, and worn thin, birthday candles, lullabies, guitar strings that stopped buzzing under beginner fingers. My grandma is my home. Arthur says, my grandma is my mother. Emily says, my grandma tells the truth even when it hurts. Andrea says, and I close my eyes because I remember the first time I told her that truth in a hallway light. Sometimes adults make decisions they think are escapes. They are actually trapdoors. Their words cross the aisle. The gavel does not move. When love testifies, wood stays still. The last page cliffhanger, Mrs. Vance. The judge says, voice measured, you referenced one final document. I look down at the envelope that has grown as light as a prayer after you've finally said it. At the bottom lives a page folded so many times it has the softness of fabric. I pull it free. This, I say, is a letter written by my daughter, 3 days after she left. I found it years later, among the things her landlady kept in a box labeled uncollected. It is written in her hand. It is signed. It is dated. Across from me, Valerie's breath catches. Across from me, a lawyer prepares to argue with ink. I do not read it yet, because the truth is not only what you reveal, it is the order in which you reveal it. Stories are how we make sense of the debris life drops at our door. Courtrooms insist on chronology, hearts do not. I lift the page and look at my daughter, not as a defendant, but as the child who once fell asleep on my chest with a fever and let my heartbeat convince her to stay. Before I read this, I say, I want the court to understand something. I am not here for revenge. I am here for protection. If there is to be mercy today, let it belong to the children. I turn to the judge. Permission to read? I say, granted, he answers. I unfold the paper. The crease sighs like a door opening. I take a breath, and I begin hold the page as if it were a bird I'm afraid to crush and too afraid to release. The courtroom slows into the kind of hush that ruins clocks. Outside, a siren wanders somewhere, small and far away, like another life calling to this one and not getting through. Read, Judge Mason says softly, and I hear no impatience in it, only the weary reverence of a man who has seen what words can do to families and yet still believes words might save one. I steady my breath and begin. I, Valerie Vance, age 26, admit I do not have the emotional, economic, or psychological capacity to raise my children Arthur 7, Emily 5, Andrea 3. I voluntarily relinquish my rights as their mother to my mother, Eleanor Vance, granting her full authority to make all legal, medical, and educational decisions. I waive the right to visitation or future claims. This decision is final. The date is inked across the bottom like a bruise refusing to fade. October 15, 2011. The signature is my daughter's, bold, where it starts, thinner as it ends, a confident beginning bleeding into a shaking goodbye. I lift my eyes. The room has tilted. Mark Sullivan's jaw hardens into caution. My daughter's shoulders rise and fall like the floor beneath her has become a tide. Your Honor, he says, standing, we object to admission. No witness to execution. No notarization. No chain of custody. Sit, counsel. The judge replies, voice, even, then to me, Mrs. Vance. It was in a banker's box the landlady kept after my daughter left the apartment. I say, I found it 2 years ago, folded among bills and photographs. The landlady is prepared to testify about that week and my daughter's condition. The judge nods slowly. He studies the page himself, then passes it back to the clerk. Marked for identification, he says. We will hear the landlady. Valerie stands suddenly, her chair scraping the floor with a sound that makes the audience flinch. I was sick, she says, voice breaking on the past tense. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought. She stops. There is more, and it is heavier than her lungs. Ms. Vance, the judge cautions, you will have a chance to speak. For now, but a story is a flood, and my daughter has found the breach. She made me feel like a failure, she blurts, eyes burning me across the distance. She always did, ever since I was a teenager. I couldn't breathe in that house without feeling compared to something better. The letter, she gestures at the page as though it were an enemy who arrived uninvited to back her into a corner. I wrote it because it was easier to fail on paper than in person. Isn't that what you always wanted, Mom? Neatness, order, a tidy ending. The words hit me in all the places I used to think were armor. I do not answer, not because I have nothing to say, but because I have finally learned there are battles you win by not entering them. Judge Mason taps the gavel once, a gentle knock on a door we're all pretending to respect. Counsel, he says to Sullivan, you will address the letter's legal weight after we hear the witness. For now, the court will hear the remainder of Mrs. Vance's evidence. I nod. The envelope, almost empty now, still holds one more thing, the kind of evidence that doesn't belong to a decade ago, but to 2 months back. Not a relic, a flare. I press the printed text messages forward with the investigator's summary and the eviction notice. Lines of type that hum the monotonous panic of unpaid balances. Very well, the judge says, we will proceed to witness testimony. The landlady, they call her, Mrs. Paula Sterling, a woman who looks built from careful lines and better intentions. Cardigan sleeves pushed to the elbows like she keeps readiness where other people keep jewelry. She swears in, hands clasped so tightly her rings have left crescent moons in her fingers. I owned the unit Ms. Vance rented, she says. She fell behind. I tried to work with her. Then one day she left with a man. She took a suitcase and some clothes. The children were not with her. 3 days later she came back for 10 minutes, asked me for paper and a pen. She sat on the hallway stairs and wrote a letter. When she finished, she looked calm, like someone who has decided to stop running by sitting down. She slipped it under the apartment door. But she didn't have the key anymore, so it slid into the crack and stayed visible for a second. Then the building's air pushed it inside. How do you know the content? Sullivan asks, like a man hoping the sea is shallow. I didn't read it then, she says, but when I cleaned the apartment weeks later, I found it with her other things. I put everything in a box. I keep boxes for people who leave pieces of themselves behind. Did you give the box to Mrs. Eleanor Vance? The judge asks. Yes. She came asking for birth certificates. I gave her everything. She found the letter at home. She later showed it to me. Same paper, same handwriting, same date. Her demeanor when she wrote, the judge says, careful, lucid. Mrs. Sterling says, and I see relief and ruin ripple through the courtroom together. Sober, tired, but steady. Sullivan thanks her in that clipped way lawyers do when they realize a witness didn't come to save them. He sits. My daughter stares at the tabletop as if it might open and let her fall through to a place where stories don't keep their receipts. Crosswinds, Your Honor, Sullivan says, rising again. We move to exclude the renunciation on grounds of lack of formalities and capacity. Noted, the judge replies. Will address admissibility in due course. He pauses, then swivels a fraction toward Valerie, without quite turning his body away from the bench's authority. Miss Vance, the court will hear from you now. My daughter steps into the witness chair like someone waking into a nightmare they've dreamed before. The oath leaves her mouth in a ragged line. Why did you leave the children? Sullivan asks, voice lowered, rhythmic, almost pastoral. He's building a raft from sympathy and hoping to float her across. I was drowning, she says. I had postpartum depression, panic that wore a different face each day. I thought if I could just rest just for a week or two, if I could sleep without worrying about food and rent and 3 small butties, maybe I could come back as the mother they needed. Then I met Javier. He said he could help me start over. He said the past was a chain and I had the key. Sullivan nods. Did you intend to abandon your children? She shakes her head, a quick, furious negative that stirs the air. No. I intended to return when I could bear to look in a mirror and not see a failure. And the letter. I wrote it, she says, and the room takes a breath it didn't know it was holding. But I didn't understand what I was writing meant for years. It felt like an apology dressed up as permission. I wanted my mother to stop judging me. I wanted the world to stop needing me. I wanted the word breaks and drops. I wanted quiet. Sullivan guides her to the next dock. Did you remain unwell? No. She whispers, I married, I had a son, I was. Better the admission is a double-edged blade. It glints, even as it cuts. The judge makes a note. So do all of us, silently. And why seek custody now? She glances at me, and I see at the split second where honesty and advantage collide like 2 cars at an intersection that never deserved a traffic light. Because I'm their mother, she says at last. Because I woke up and it was 13 years later, and the guilt had grown teeth. Because I thought I could fix it by starting where I left off. Did the inheritance motivate you? Sullivan asks, gentler than a lawyer should be. She swallows. It made everything feel urgent, she says. The line lands like a feather, like a brick. He sits. A judge's memory. Judge Mason leans back as though he is listening for an echo from his own past. He has that look older men get when the law, for once, feels heavier than the bench meant it to be. Ms. Vance, he says, the medical records your counsel submitted show you were discharged from psychiatric care 2 months before the letter. The court is not a physician, but it can read dates. They also show you married shortly after. They further show consistent involvement in the education of your son, Paul. He lets the name settle another child, floating in this river of facts. I must therefore assume capacity is not your strongest argument. My daughter's mouth opens and closes. There is nothing in it that can help her today. The judge pivots to me. Mrs. Vance, you spoke of printed messages. The court has read them. Extortion cloaked in maternal urgency is still extortion. You have requested a restraining order, permanent guardianship confirmation, and acknowledgement of the letter's import. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, I say. With one addition, his eyebrow lifts just enough to register. I say, and my voice surprises me by not trembling, that the record reflect the children's clearly stated wishes. They are not objects in dispute but people who have spent 13 years becoming themselves. Duly noted, he says. He regards all of us for a moment, then raps the gavel once. 15-minute recess. When we return, I will issue preliminary findings. The room exhales into motion, shuffling, whispering, the soft percussion of shame wrapped in expensive fabric. My grandchildren thread toward me through the aisle and fold me into a 3-person embrace that steadies the ground. Hallway, the longest hallway outside the courtroom, has the polite smell of wax and worry. Fluorescent lights flatten everyone into the same fatigue. On one end, A vending machine hums like an insect with a law degree. Valerie approaches, ignoring her lawyer's outstretched hand and his whispered "not now." She stands an arm's length away, too far for tenderness, too close for pretense. "Mom," she says, "please, not for me, for them. I can do better now. I can try." I think of Andrea's guitar humming scales against the afternoon window. I think of Emily cataloging calories and insulin and courage. Of Arthur learning to change a tire in the rain because life will not always wait for a mechanic. I think of the letter ink, dried hard, guilt still wet. "It isn't a test," I say. "There isn't a better that earns back time." Her face collapses into the child she used to be when the lesson was too big for the day. "What do I do?" she asks, and it isn't manipulation. It's a real question, raw and too late. "You go and become the woman your children might want to meet," I say, "not because a judge makes you, because decency does." She closes her eyes. "And if they never want to see me, then you live with that," I whisper, "and you keep living anyway." My grandchildren hover, not eavesdropping so much as existing in the space between our words. Emily looks from me to Valerie and back, like a translator who knows both languages and trusts neither. Can I ever be forgiven?" Valerie asks. "Forgiveness." The word feels like a fragile glass bird placed in my hand by someone who doesn't realize how strong my grip has had to be. "I forgave you years ago," I say, and watch her posture change, as if a heavy garment has been lifted and replaced with a lighter but colder one. But forgiveness is not custody. Forgiveness is not access. Forgiveness is not the key to other people's doors. The bailiff calls us back before she can answer. We re-enter the world where paper decides what love has already paid for. Findings. The courtroom reassembles its solemn geometry. Judge Mason takes his seat and the room remembers it owes him its silence. "This case," he begins, "is not about who loves these children. Love is a word courts here often and rarely weigh. This case is about duty, who has carried it, who laid it down, and who arrived today asking to pick it up because money reminded them it exists." He turns to the clerk. "Mark exhibit of the renunciation as admitted for limited purposes. While it lacks formal notarization, the surrounding facts: witness testimony, contemporaneous behavior, subsequent marriage, documented absence, later involvement with another child, grant its significant persuasive value on the issue of intent. Final weight reserved." Sullivan's pen stops moving. Mine does too. "The temporary guardianship issued a decade ago is hereby confirmed as permanent for the minor, Andrea. Emily, being 18, is an adult. The court will note her statement of preference and declines to disturb her autonomy. As for Arthur, already 20, the court acknowledges his status and statements as clarifying context. He lifts the printouts of the messages between forefinger and thumb, as if holding a thing that remains unclean, no matter how much law you pour over it. On the issue of threats, this court refers the matter to the district attorney for evaluation of potential criminal charges. Mrs. Eleanor Vance has indicated she does not wish to pursue. That will be her right to assert, consistent with the DA's discretion. My daughter draws in a breath that sounds like a door opening and shutting in quick succession. "A restraining order will issue for 5 years, the judge continues, limiting Ms. Valerie Vance's contact with the minors to court-approved channels. Any petition to modify will require substantial proof of sustained change." He sets the papers down. "As to the inheritance, it remains the children's property. Any adult management thereof shall continue under existing trust instruments until each beneficiary reaches 21. Neither this court nor any petitioning party will convert that property into a lever for contact." Then he does something I don't expect. He leans forward, looking not at counsel, not at me, but at my daughter. For a moment, he is no longer a bench, but a father with a memory he has never confessed to the empty corridors of this building. "Ms. Vance," he says, "there is a kind of regret that wants to retroactively parent a child into forgiving you. Do not parent your regret. Parent yourself. If you do that for long enough, your children may decide, as adults, to see who you have become, or they may not. Either outcome is justice." The words fall through the room like snow that knows it is burying a road and still believes spring will find it. The gavel lifts. This is the order of the court. Wood meets wood. The sound is less a strike than a seal. Aftermath. The weight of quiet. We don't cheer. Families like ours don't cheer when paper lines up with survival. We sit through the rustle of people leaving, as if standing too quickly might unsettle the ink. Arthur squeezes my shoulder. Emily presses her forehead to mine for a heartbeat. Andrea threads her fingers through mine like a rosary. Valerie stays seated long after. Mark Sullivan collects his briefcase the way a man retrieves a hat that no longer belongs to the weather. He says something to her and she doesn't answer. For a second, she looks over her shoulder toward us, not a plea, not yet, but the beginning of a vocabulary she has never learned to speak. We step into the corridor, and the building exhales us toward the street. Outside, the afternoon has decided to be beautiful without asking our permission. Sun on courthouse steps, the sound of buses grinding their gears back into the lives of people who didn't just have theirs rearranged by strangers in robes. Elma is waiting under the awning like an ant the sky invented for this very purpose. She folds me into a hug that says, "You survived," and also, "Eat something." She passes Andrea a butterscotch from the bottom of a purse that has healed 100 small emergencies. We laugh an odd, shocked little noise as though our throats are trying on joy to see if it still fits. "Home," I say at last, because there is soup to reheat, and textbooks to open, and insulin needles to count, and a guitar to tune, because the world, thank God, insists. Night ledger. The house doesn't feel victorious when we return. It feels earned. Arthur heads for his desk with the discipline of a boy who became a man practicing how not to need rescues. Emily preps her Kitmetter strips, journal qui competence that still makes my chest ache with a mother's terrified gratitude. Andrea sets the guitar in her lap and plays scales that sound like a staircase back to calm. I wash the same 4 bowls we've used 1,000 times, a liturgy of soap and repetition. On the table lies the yellow envelope, now a patient animal that has finally unloaded its burden. I sit and slide my palm over it the way you pet an old dog whose muzzle has gone gray. I expect relief to arrive like a parade. It doesn't. Relief arrives like a chair. You sit, you notice how tired your legs were. The phone buzzes. Elma. "I made tamales." "Don't argue." I smile. Text a heart. Then I do a thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I pick up the envelope again, not because I need it, but because artifacts are magnets for the hand. Proof is a habit that outlives the reasons we collected it. A soft knock at the door I will always hear, even when I am sleeping. When I open, there is no one on the porch, only a small paper bag on the top step. Inside, a loaf of bread, still warm, and a note with handwriting I've studied all my adult life. "Thank you for telling the truth. -v. No request. No plea. No number. Just a line thrown across a river no bridge has yet agreed to span." I place the bread on the counter between the soup and the future. The next morning, Choices morning, is not kinder. It is simply new. The house finds its rhythm: early alarm kettle, insulin, toast. The ordinary is a miracle when the extraordinary has tried to replace it. Arthur leaves for class with that half-run that marks a bus about to give up waiting for you. Emily heads to her shift at the bookstore, scarf bright against the city's early cold. Andrea stands by the door with her guitar case, head tilted. "Grandma," she says. "Yes, love, if Valerie ever really changes, really would it be okay if I wanted to hear her sing? Like, just once?" My throat tightens in that old foolish way grief has of pretending it is surprise. I touch her cheek. "Whatever you choose later, when you are ready, you won't be choosing against me. You'll be choosing for yourself." She nods. And I realize this is the first truly adult gift I have given any of them. The permission to decide, without the debt of my feelings attached. She goes. The house is quiet again, and quiet, finally, is not an absence but a resource. I put the yellow envelope in the high cupboard, the one where I keep the wedding photo of my husband, the baptism candle that never quite burned out, and the recipe card my mother wrote for a cake we were too poor to bake more than twice a year. I tell the envelope, "Rest," as if it can hear me. Maybe it can. Then I sit with my coffee and a blank notepad. On the top line I write, "To do, call trust officer. Confirm next steps, find Andrea a sturdier guitar strap. Ask Emily if she needs new test strips. Remind Arthur to eat lunch." That isn't courage halfway down the page. My pen keeps going without a command from me. Pray for Valerie. Min iti underline, the last one. Twice. The call by noon. The phone rings again. A voice I don't recognize identifies herself as Ms. Patel from the district attorney's office. She speaks with the careful courtesy of someone who knows their work, enters Holmes like a draft. "We received the referral from Judge Mason," she says. "Given your stated wishes on the record, we are inclined to keep this on file without action. Should you change your mind, I won't," I say. A B. May I ask why? Because even justice has a mother, I think. And today she is tired, because consequences have already arrived. I say instead, she will live with them long after paperwork stops turning. Miss Patel is silent for a breath that contains an opinion and the training not to let it out. Understood, she says. We'll note your position. I thank her. After we hang up, I stand for a long time looking at nothing, the way you do when your body is teaching your mind a lesson it didn't sign up for. Choosing not to punish is also a kind of pain. A letter I don't send that evening, after homework and dinner and the small domestic choir of dishes and a dryer thumping a lost button, I sit again with paper. This time I write a letter I do not plan to mail. Sometimes the only audience that matters is the person you have been trying not to be. Valerie, I remember the day you were born. You were quiet, not because you were calm, but because you were listening. You have always listened, even when you pretended not to. My mistake was thinking listening would save you from the world. It doesn't. It only gives you a map of where not to go. I loved you the same way I loved your children. Insufficiently, and with everything I had. These truths can live together. If you ever come back, don't bring a lawyer. Bring proof of mornings you got up when there was no reason to. Bring a receipt for kindness you paid forward when it couldn't find its change. Bring the name of a therapist who knows your story and still believes your ending isn't written. Bring a song for Andrea, a book for Emily, and a socket wrench for Arthur. Bring nothing for me. I already have what I need. Mom, I fold the page, place it on top of the fridge, the house's altar for unsent prayers. The yellow envelope sleeps inches away. There is a symmetry too that I do not miss. Cliff, a door, and the dark night swallows. The neighborhood in that gentle way late autumn has when it is practicing to be winter. I turn off lights one by one. The house hums. When I reach the front hall, I see it through the narrow window in the door, a figure on the porch, not moving, not threatening, just there. I open it to the chain, careful. My daughter stands on the step with her coat wrapped close, not because of the cold, but because she is making herself smaller in the only way left. I'm not here to ask for anything, she says before I can speak. She looks down, then up, and the change fills the space between us like a fragile new air. I started therapy twice a week. I got a day job at a clinic, and I found a studio. It's mine. I paid the deposit with money I made cleaning, not money I could have gotten from anywhere else. I thought you should know. She takes a breath. Also, she adds, almost as an afterthought a braver woman would have led with, I filed a voluntary dismissal, no appeal. A sound leaves my body I do not recognize. It is relief and sorrow and the exhale of a house after a storm passes and counts its windows. Thank you, I say. She nods, steps back once, twice, like a diver measuring a place to leap from. Tell the kids I won't break the order, not even by accident. Someday, if they call. She stops. Never mind. Good night. She turns to go. Valerie, I say, and my voice surprises me by carrying into the dark without asking my permission. She looks back. When you can stand in your own life without asking anyone to hold it up for you, bring me proof, not documents. Days. For a second, for the first time in 13 years, her smile looks exactly like the one I remember from a Saturday long before any of this, when we both laughed at something that had nothing to do with survival. I will, she says. The porch light hums. The street holds. The door closes. I stand for a long time with my palm flat against the wood. On the other side is a woman who may yet meet her children on a road where no one is running. On this side are the children I will feed breakfast in the morning. Between us, a door, properly latched. Boundaries are just doors that wait for the right knock. Upstairs, Andrea's guitar stops mid, then finds the note it was looking for. I turn out the last light. 3 months later they say time heals, but I've learned it doesn't heal it. It takes the chaos of what happened and puts it into drawers. Some stay closed. Some rattle at night. 3 months after the court ruling, the rhythm of our lives has started to steady again. The legal noise has gone quiet, replaced by small, holy sounds. Andrea's laughter echoing down the hall. The clink of Arthur's engineering tools. Emily's humming as she folds laundry and whispers to herself about insulin schedules and college dreams. There are everyday ones that remind me what peace sounds like after 13 years of emergency. But peace, I've also learned, is not silence, it's maintenance. And every so often, silence knocks at your door. The visit from Elmitz, A Friday evening. The air smells like rain that can't decide. I'm peeling potatoes when the doorbell rings. Elma stands there with her familiar basket and her familiar news face. She doesn't even step in before she says, "Eleanor, I need to tell you something about Valerie." My hands freeze over the sink. There are 1,000 possible endings to that sentence. She continues, "Theodore, my brother. The judge said she's been asking about the appeal process." The sound of that word hits me like a nail being tapped into old wood. Appeal. Elma nods. She went to the clerk's office last week, wanted to know how soon she could reopen the case. I close my eyes for a moment, not in disbelief, in recognition. Some people don't know how to stop reaching for what they already lost. What did they tell her? I ask quietly. That she has no grounds. None, Elma says. The letter, the witnesses, the evidence, everything's sealed tight. But Eleanor, her voice softens. Javier left her. The knife slips in my hand, just enough to slice the edge of the potato skin thinner than air. Left her. She's alone. He took their son, Paul, and moved to Houston. Said he couldn't stay with a woman who lost $150,000 for being sentimental. His words, not mine. For a moment, I just stand there, looking at the rain. She's still my daughter. Even after all of this, hearing she's suffering hurts in a way I can't switch off. Where is she now? I ask. The small apartment near downtown, Elma says. Working nights, cleaning offices, barely scraping by. Theodore says, she looks like someone who hasn't eaten hope in a long time. The question that changes everything. Andrea walks in, wiping paint off her fingers from a school project. Is that about Mom? She asks, reading the worry in my eyes, the way children read clouds for storms. Yes, I answer softly. She's going through something hard. Andreas sits across from me, chin in hand, and asks the question that stops me cold. Do you feel bad for her, Grandma? The honesty of it so simple, so sharp cuts through my exhaustion. I sit down, the potato forgotten, the faucet still dripping behind me. Yes, sweetheart, I do. I don't like knowing she's suffering. But that doesn't mean we did something wrong, right? Andrea asks, her teenage voice steady in a way only pain can make it. I smile. No, my love. Sometimes you can feel compassion and still protect yourself from the person who hurt you. Both things can be true. Andrea nods slowly, her eyes filled with that mix of empathy and inherited caution I wish she didn't have to carry when she leaves. Elma looks at me and says quietly, Eleanor, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I sigh. I don't know yet, but maybe it's time to stop pretending my daughter doesn't exist. The drive the next morning, I do something even I didn't expect. I drive to the grocery store and fill 2 bags with food, rice, beans, chicken, milk, vegetables. Nothing extravagant, just the kind of food that says, I remember what it's like to be hungry. That it's raining again when I reach the apartment complex Elma described. The building is old, paint peeling, balconies rusted, the kind of place where lives stack on top of each other, trying not to collapse. Apartment 3B. Her name on a paper label. I knock. Who is it? Her voice, small, tired, like someone who's forgotten how to sound hopeful. It's me, I say. Your mom. There's silence. Then, the faint sound of bolts turning. When the door opens, it's like looking at a ghost that learned to breathe again. Her face is pale, eyes sunken, hair tied back with no energy for vanity. Mom, she whispers, what are you doing here? I brought you some things, I say, lifting the bags. Can I come in? She hesitates, then steps aside. The apartment is small, but clean. A sofa, a flickering lamp, unpaid bills stacked like a guilty conscience. I put the groceries on the table. She stares at them, then at me. Why? She asks, voice breaking. After everything I did, why would you help me? I look at her. This daughter who's both my greatest heartbreak and my most fragile miracle. Because you're my child, I say simply. Because even when you do everything wrong, I can't unlove you. The collapse. She sits down hard, as if her body just gave up pretending to be strong. Tears fall soundlessly at first, then, all at once. Mom, she says, choking on the word, I lost everything. Javier took Paul. He told me I was a loser, that I'd had one chance to fix my life and blew it. I sit beside her. And what did you tell him? Nothing, she whispers. Because he's right. I am a loser. I lost my kids. I lost my home. I lost the inheritance. I lost Valerie, I say, softly but firmly. You didn't lose your first children. You abandoned them. There's a difference. She looks at me, stunned, as if the truth has just slapped the self-pity out of her. You're always going to remind me, aren't you? She says bitterly. No, I reply, but I'll never let you rewrite what happened. If you want to change, you start by naming things correctly. She wipes her face. And what do I name this? Her voice cracks. This emptiness, this loneliness. Consequence, I say gently. Not punishment, consequence. The mirror. We sit in silence for a long time. The only sound is the fridge buzzing, trying too hard. Finally, she asks, is there any way I can ever see them again? Maybe, I say, but not because of me. Only when they choose it, when they're ready, if they ever are. And until then, you work on yourself. You find a reason to stand up that isn't someone else's approval. You go to therapy. You find work you're proud of. You become the woman you'd want your daughter to call mom. She looks up at me, eyes full of something fragile, hope or grief. I can't tell. Will you visit me again? She whispers. I don't know, Valerie. That depends on what you do next. I stand to leave. As I open the door, I turn back. The food will last you a week. After that, you'll have to take care of yourself. She nods, her hands folded like prayer. Good night, Mom, she says softly. It's been years since I've heard her call me that. The sound follows me down the stairs, echoing in the narrow hallway until it becomes something else, something like closure, but not quite. The kitchen light when I return home. Arthur is in the kitchen working on a project. He looks up, alarmed. Grandma, where were you? I take off my coat and hang it on the chair. I went to see your biological mother, I say, choosing truth over comfort. He freezes. Why? Because she was hungry. And because she's still my daughter. His jaw tightens. Does that mean you're letting her back into our lives? No, I reply. It means I can feel compassion without lowering our guard. He exhales, slow, measured. Do you think she ever change? I don't know, I say honestly. But if she does, it has to be because she decides to, not because anyone saves her. Arthur nods, quietly returning to his work. He doesn't say it. But I see the relief in his shoulders. The relief of knowing that mercy and boundaries can live in the same house. The lesson of the envelope that night. I lie awake thinking about the yellow envelope. It's back in the cupboard now, but I can feel its weight in the air. As if stories carry their own gravity long after they've been told. For years, that envelope was my shield. Now, it's a mirror. It reminds me that protection without compassion turns into bitterness, and compassion without boundaries turns into ruin. I whispered to the dark, maybe, someday, she'll understand. Then I close my eyes, and for the first time in months, I sleep without dreaming of a courtroom. Cliffhanger. The letter from Valerie a week later. A letter arrives in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in Valerie's hand. I open it at the kitchen table, heart steady but cautious. Mom, I started therapy. I got a job as a receptionist at a clinic. I'm saving for a better place. I'm not asking to see them. I just wanted you to know, I'm trying. For once in my life, I want to build something without taking it from someone else. Thank you for not letting me lie to myself anymore. Love, Valerie. The paper trembles in my hands, not because I'm weak, but because sometimes forgiveness comes disguised as accountability. I fold the letter and place it beside the yellow envelope. One holds the past, the other, maybe, the beginning of something else. A spring without courtroom. Spring came quietly that year. No letters from lawyers, no court summons, no pounding guilt waiting in the mailbox, just the sound of the old house breathing again. Arthur had found a part-time job repairing vintage radios. Emily was applying to nursing programs. Andrea, now 17, spent her weekends painting walls at the animal shelter. Their laughter had started to sound like music again, not background noise to grief, but proof of recovery. I was relearning peace. It isn't dramatic. It's ordinary morning sunlight over cereal bowls, quiet dinners, folded laundry that smells like soap instead of fear. And yet, in that peace, there was a hollow space, not grief exactly, something softer, like forgiveness, knocking politely and waiting to be let in. The call from the clinic. It was late afternoon when the phone rang. A young voice said, "Is this Mrs. Vance?" "Yes," I said, cautious. "This is the Riverside Community Clinic. Your daughter, Valerie, asked me to let you know she's been awarded Employee of the Month. She said she didn't have anyone else to call." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I realized how lonely no one else to call really sounds. "Please tell her I'm proud," I finally said. "And tell her I said congratulations." The young woman on the other end smiled through her voice. "I think she was hoping you'd say that. The birthday, Emily's 19th birthday, came that May. We planned something small, her favorite lemon cake, friends from the bookstore, a few balloons. Halfway through the afternoon, as I was slicing cake, I saw something on the porch, a brown paper package. No note, just Emily's name written in Valerie's looping handwriting. Andrea saw it first. Is that from her? I nodded slowly. Looks like it. Arthur's jaw clenched. You're not going to let her start showing up again, are you? No, I said softly, but I think she's trying to show up in small ways, and that's different. Emily opened the package. Inside was a stethoscope, brand new, shining silver and black, with a card that read, "For the future nurse. Love, Mom." Emily held it for a long time before she said, almost in a whisper, "Do you think she means it this time?" I looked at the stethoscope. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't performative. It was thoughtful. She's learning, I said, the difference between apology and effort. Letters across distance over the next few months. Letters began to arrive, not often, never pushy, one every few weeks, handwritten, gentle, and honest. "Mom, therapy is helping. I've learned that shame and love can live in the same body. I'm trying to let one take the front seat. Please tell Emily congratulations on the nursing interview." I still remember her pretending to give vaccines to her dolls. "Arthur reminds me so much of Dad when he fixes things. Tell him I said that, if it won't upset him. Andrea's art. You should see it." I looked at the shelter's Facebook page. I knew it was hers by the colors. She paints like someone trying to heal the world, one wall at a time. Each letter found its way into the top drawer of the kitchen desk. The same drawer that once held unpaid bills and emergency plans. Now it held hope, alphabetized. The encounter, one afternoon in early June. Emily came home pale and trembling. "Grandma," she said, voice barely steady. "I saw her, where? At the cafe near the hospital." She didn't see me, I don't think. She was wearing her clinic uniform. She looked healthy. She looked different. I studied my granddaughter's face. "And how did that make you feel?" Emily hesitated, scared at first, then sad, then maybe proud. I nodded. "That's how healing starts, darling. Not when we forget, but when the feelings stop fighting each other." Emily sat down and whispered, "Do you think she still loves us?" "She never stopped," I said. "She just forgot how to show it." The letter to Andrea. One morning, Andrea found a letter addressed to her in the mailbox. She stared at it for hours before bringing it to me. "Should I open it?" she asked. "That's up to you," I said. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. "My dear Andrea, you were 3 when I left, but you're the one who appears in my dreams the most. I remember your curls sticking to your forehead after a bath, how you'd fall asleep on my chest humming without words. I didn't deserve to hear those songs, but I never forgot them. You once asked me in a dream why I didn't come back. I didn't have an answer. Now I do. I was afraid of the look in your eyes, the one that knew what I'd done before I did. I can't undo those years, but if there's ever a day you want to know me again, I'll be waiting. Not as the mother who demands, but as the woman who's learned to ask. Love always, Valerie." Andrea didn't cry right away. She just folded the letter and held it to her chest like it was both a wound and a bandaged off. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Grandma, she's learning how to be sorry." The visit request. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived from Valerie's therapist. Inside was a simple request form. Client requests 1 supervised family visit, not for custody or contact rights, but for closure and emotional accountability. Suggested neutral location, Therapy Center Garden. Date, August 5th. I read it 3 times. The paper blurred as my eyes filled. Arthur, ever the protector, said immediately, no. She had her chance. Emily looked torn. Andrea said nothing. I took a deep breath. No one's being forced. We'll talk about it, together. That night, we sat around the old dining table, our war room, for every crisis that's ever shaped us. Arthur crossed his arms. What's the point? She cry, apologize, and then what? Emily spoke softly. Maybe she just needs to say sorry with someone there to hear it. Andrea looked at me. What do you want, Grandma? I thought for a long moment. I want peace, I said, and sometimes peace needs witnesses. The garden. August 5th arrived, warm and bright. The therapist's garden was a quiet space, fountain bubbling, benches under a willow tree, air heavy with lavender. Valerie was already there, sitting nervously, her hands clasped like someone praying to forgiveness itself. When she saw us, she stood, then froze. Her eyes filled instantly. Arthur's jaw tightened. Emily's fingers twitched. Andrea stood still as stone. Valerie spoke first. Thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve it. No one answered. I'm not here to beg, she continued. I'm here to say I'm sorry and to accept if that's all I ever get. She looked at each of them in turn. Arthur, thank you for keeping them safe. Emily, for being the woman I couldn't be. Andrea, her voice broke, for painting the world in color when I only left you gray. Tears rolled down Andrea's cheeks. Silent, honest, daughter. Then Valerie turned to me. And you, Mom, thank you for raising them to be better than both of us. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn the chance to know them, not as a mother, but as a person who finally understands what love costs. No one spoke, but the silence wasn't sharp this time. It was gentle. The first hug, it was Andrea who moved first. She stepped forward, slowly, like approaching a skittish animal. Then she hugged her mother, just once. Just long enough. Valerie didn't sob or collapse. She just closed her eyes and breathed. For the first time in 13 years, her breath didn't sound like an apology. Emily followed. Then Arthur, hesitant, reserved, but present. When my turn came, she looked at me through tears. You were right, she whispered. Days are the proof. I touched her cheek. Then keep collecting them. The leaving when the visit ended, Valerie didn't ask for another. She didn't promise the impossible or make speeches about reunion. She just said, thank you, and walked away, strap-backed, trembling, but walking. Andrea watched her go. She looks lighter, she said. She is, I replied. So are we. The symbol that night, as the sun sank through the curtains, I took the yellow envelope down one last time. It had been our protection, our defense, our truth. But now, it had become something else, history. I opened the fireplace door and held it above the flame. Arthur whispered, Grandma, are you sure? Yes, I said. We don't need it anymore. We have the living proof. The paper caught fire quickly. For a moment, the room glowed gold. Then it was just ashlight, floating, free. We stood there, the four of us, watching it burn, not erasing, releasing. The house after the fire, the morning after I burned the yellow envelope. The house felt different, lighter, quieter, not empty clean. The smoke still lingered faintly in the curtains, but I didn't mind. Some smells are worth keeping for the reminder that we can end things without hating them. For 13 years, that envelope had been my armor. Now, my armor was gone, and for the first time, I didn't feel exposed. I felt alive. Do you ever wish it had been easier? She asked. No, I said. If it were easy, it wouldn't have meant anything. She laughed quietly. You always say things like that. Maybe that's why they stick, I replied. She looked at the sunset, gold melting into pink. I'm proud of the woman I'm becoming. I'm proud of her too, I said. Tell her to keep going. The final goodbye the next morning. She left before sunrise. No tears, no grand speeches, just a hug that lasted long enough to say everything we'd never found words for. As her car disappeared down the road, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Completion, the kind that doesn't end in loss, but in balance. Epilogue, the recording months later. I was invited to speak at a community event for foster families. They asked me to share my story, not the courtroom, not the scandal, but the healing. I told them this: sometimes love has to take custody before the law does. Sometimes forgiveness arrives in small installments, not miracles. And sometimes the people who leave don't need to be chased, they need to be found. Years later, when they've finally stopped running. Afterward, a young woman from the crowd approached me in tears. She said, my mother left when I was 6. I've hated her ever since. But now, I think I'll call her. I smiled. That's how the story keeps going. The ocean again a year later. I returned to the coast. The same beach where Valerie had once given me that seashell. I held it to my ear again. The ocean roared softly, steady, eternal. Not an echo anymore, but an answer. For years, I thought forgiveness was for the guilty. Now I know it's for the living. I placed the seashell in the sand. Let the tide take it. Then I whispered to the wind. Not for her, not for me, but for everything we'd survived. We made it home. The water rose, shimmered gold under the sun, and carried the shell away. And just like that, the story that began with an envelope ended with a wave.